So as I look up at Jim, he's not wearing his hat, so I'm not going to wear mine either. And I think he'd be okay if I took my gloves off also. Good morning. What a sight. I think your mere presence gives hope and inspires all of us. On behalf of the Waters family and our IMPD family, we thank you for all the show of support. So I'm going to say something here in a little bit that most of you, or a lot of you, unless you really interacted with Jim quite a bit, you won't get this. Maybe at the end you will a little bit, but only those closest to Jim might understand this. But Jim was the best manipulator, the absolute best manipulator. He could get you to do things you hadn't thought of and make you think it was the best thing to do. Even if you were not so sure, he was so nice about it that you wouldn't push back. Jim would also telegraph the manipulation. We as police officers were often, unfortunately or fortunately, we look at people and we try and read them, right? So I did this with Jim. I knew if he invited me to breakfast or lunch, something was coming, but for some reason I never resisted. He had hand mannerisms. I don't know if you knew him, anytime he wanted you to do something, he started this. And you knew it was coming, but you'd still give in, even after all those cues. At executive staff, he'd sit across the table from me, and he'd say, "Chief, afterwards, if you have a few moments, I've got a couple things." And I knew, here it comes. So we'd step in the office, and we'd start talking, and I knew it was coming, and then the hand mannerisms would start. No matter what, he walked out the door, and whatever it was he wanted, we were doing. I often pictured him walking outside my office, doing an arm pump, and then rubbing his hands together, like who's next? Not in a demonic sense, but more of a big fairy godmother. Like who do I go help next? Tim and Sherry and I were at his bedside last week, and sorry, Jim, or Tim, but Tim shared one of those experiences with me, and Sherry had plenty of those manipulating experiences also. Jim talked Tim into buying a horse. Tim didn't really know why he was buying a horse, but Tim bought a horse because Jim talked him into it. Strangely then, the story gets even better. Jim talked Tim into giving Jim the horse. So this inability for us to resist Jim made me think about some of his best qualities. As we've heard today, and as anyone that has spent any time with Jim knows, there's a different spirit about him. As I wrote this, my thoughts went to the following quote by author G.K. Chesterton. And I'll say it twice because you got to think about it. It says, "How much larger your life would be if yourself could become smaller in it." How much larger your life would be if yourself would become so much smaller in it. To me, Jim was larger than life, not just his size, but because his concern for others was so much greater than his concern for himself. Jim understood that no worldly ideas or principles have the power to change us for the better. No fascinating lectures or entertaining presentations can touch individuals so profoundly that they turn their hearts to do good or be more Christ-like. It is only by centering our interactions on the truths of the gospel that we can become instruments to help instill the faith that will lead others to do good. So what is it that we see and feel when we interact with Jim? How do we, with all the other things going on in life, become like that and have the same impact when others are around us. Now, you would never hear Jim say the words that I just said. Those are my words. But Jim's actions and treatment of others lifted people up and instilled goodness and a desire to improve and become better. Jim changed attitudes and behaviors by exemplifying Christ-like examples. Jim was the best manipulator. He convinced you to make decisions you weren't sure you wanted to make, and it happened so often because he understood that as our mindset changes and we are reminded to put the well-being of others first, our behavior changes also. As our mindset changes, we begin thinking and doing things that hadn't been imagined before. It is in these moments small miracles occur. It is in these moments wonderful memories were created with each of us that spent time with Jim. It is in these moments we are reminded that thinking of others prompted us to be the most helpful to our community. Facing death, an ancient prophet Enos said, "And I soon go to the place of my rest, which is with my Redeemer, for that I know in him I shall rest. And I rejoice in the day when my mortal shall put on immortality, and shall stand before him. Then shall I see his face with pleasure, and he will say unto me, Come unto me, you blessed. There is a place prepared for you in the mansions of my Father." I know that the promise of Enos is available to Jim, and I know that the same promise is afforded to us if we change our thinking and mindset towards others. That's what a Christ-centered life is. That is how we serve, and that is what allows for miracles in our lives and the lives of others. On behalf of the men and women of IMPD, we ask for blessings to be with Jerry and Sherry and Jim's family, that they will continue to find joy it is to be in a home where they can be loved, directed, guided, and where wounded hearts can be healed. And for all those gathered here today, let us be reminded, Jim changed so many lives for the good, including mine. We are eternally grateful to him and look forward to a lovely reunion. Yet while we are here on earth, with Jim in mind, please spend some time today thinking on how much larger our lives would be if our sense of self could become just a little bit smaller and our responsibility to our fellow man just a little bit bigger.